I was interested in this movie. I'm, kind of the sucker for the true story.
Feels kind of like an Aaron Brockovich situation where it's like
I saw that
she's got
too.
the tenacious spirit, but she's got a pretty rough and tumble personal life going on.
Hey, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the new movie, Ordinary Angels.
Rebecca, let's get started.
Sharon Stevens has been trying to drown her pain and lack of direction for years with her alcoholism. But when a newspaper talking about the tragic loss of Ed Schmidt's wife catches her eye in a supermarket, Sharon makes it her mission to relieve the family of their troubles. However, she soon learns that their youngest daughter is suffering from a terminal illness, and the only cure is a liver transplant. Will Sharon be able to bring practical results to a family clinging to their faith?
Rebecca, we've been seeing trailers for this movie, and then all of a sudden they stopped. And we didn't know if we missed the movie, and all of a sudden trailers came back.
I thought it was going to be another Wonder situation where it just mysteriously disappears from the release schedule, and then 2 years later the movie's scheduled.
Exactly. But it was a few months. I was interested in this movie. I'm, kind of the sucker for the true story, and it looked kind of sappy, but it didn't look so sappy that I would be like, oh, it looked very reality-based.
It looked a little sappy to me. The cast was the main selling point for me with this.
Oh, okay.
John Gunn, not related to James Gunn,
Yes.
as far as we know, also directed this movie. John's also written the movie Jesus Revolution, which is a movie we like on this channel.
Yes, and he was part of it. Hilary Swank. I like Hilary Swank, and she was all around in the early O's, late 90s, disappeared for a while, back on the scene. She's a great actress, and she's playing the lead. She's playing Sharon, the woman who had all kinds of issues.
Alcoholic with a splitting headache.
You talked about the alcoholism, not really, having a relationship with her adult son. Very kind of a gritty person, but a very likable, gritty person.
I think I'm supposed to help. Hi, Sharon.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to come by and give you this.
I just made dinner if you want to stay.
Would love to.
What are you doing? I met this woman. She's a mess.
Perfect. She'll fit right in.
Feels kind of like an Aaron Brockovich situation where it's like
I saw that
she's got
too.
the tenacious spirit, but she's got a pretty rough and tumble personal life going on.
The movie didn't sugarcoat that, though, and I appreciated that.
I remember we were on our way to the studio and we discussed this movie gets into some pretty dark places, but that doesn't exactly reflect in the rating that this movie ended up with.
That is true. This is a PG movie, and understandably, but Sharon's alcohol addiction, her alcoholism, was a big thing.
It's painfully present in this movie.
It's not subtle. It's not behind. The only reason I would say, hey, just think about the rating is if someone is struggling with an addiction or an alcohol issue, or maybe they know someone or love someone who has that same challenge, it could be triggering because it is very graphic.
I'd also encourage some of our cinema community who may have lost their spouse recently, think about it before you see this movie. It might bring up some feelings that you're not ready to deal with yet.
There are many heavy themes in this movie. Alan Rickson, who's Ed Schmidt, who's the primary character, whose daughter is ill. He loses his wife, and there is a deathbed situation that happens. His daughter is very ill, needs a liver transplant. We're talking about addiction, child suffering, peril. It has so many different elements to it. It made for a very powerful movie. And knowing that it's a true story based in Louisville, Kentucky in 1994.
It's interesting to me because I did some research after the movie.
Sure.
And I really wasn't able to find much, which kind of saddened me because I would have liked to have learned more about this story.
I think the part that I appreciated is some movies have so much information, it almost becomes saturated, and you've heard the story many, 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 many times. And this is a story, as you said, because there wasn't so much on it, it made it more interesting to me to go in there really blind. As we said, we try not to do spoilers. We try to understand, and some things we just know. But this one, I was relying on the trailer to tell me the story.
Since we started the show, I've been looking up less information to kind of not spoil the movie for me.
Correct. Me as well.
But after I view the movie, I like to find that out because it does inform how I see the movie. One of the big problems I had with this movie is it felt very predictable. And I would have loved to have found the true story behind it, because then I'm like, okay, that matches the events, instead of, I feel like these filmmakers are tugging at emotional straws for me to care about the characters.
And that's never a good feeling. I agree with you. Before Cocoon Cast, I would read more. And I honestly had no problem spoiling the movie for myself because it'd be like, oh, okay, I know where they're going. I kind of get it. But I did see, even actually earlier this afternoon, an interview with Hilary Swank. I think she was like on Today's Show or, one of the morning shows. And listening to her talk about this movie and just the connection she had, it doesn't replace the actual data. However, it was helpful to hear this is a story that she knows and is on board with, not just because she's acting in it. It didn't feel that way to me.
This movie feels very Christian-y, though. There was a movie a few years back, some kid fell in the ice and they were all praying for him to come out of his coma so he could live. It just feels a bit troporific and a very by-the-numbers Christian movie in some ways, but there are some points that I do like. I do like the fact that they went into Sharon's addictions. I like the fact that they talk about how her addictions influence her as a person. I like how they took Alan's character and showed emotionally, where is he at? How is he struggling? Not why is he struggling? How is he struggling, and how does that affect everybody else around him?
You're correct, because this movie is from Kingdom Story Company, and the Irwin brothers put this together. The part that's interesting, though, I understand what you're saying. There was a certain predictability, because I think it would have been a real hard sell as a movie to say this girl needs a liver transplant and she doesn't get it. I don't know if that's a movie that a lot of people would go, oh, I'm up for going to see that. They'd be like, oh. So I think there is a certain expectation she will get better. But it was interesting because as I did more research, one of the producers was Dave Matthews, as if Dave Matthews, the musician.
The Dave Matthews?
The Dave Matthews. And one of the co-writers of this was Meg Tilly, Big Chill, all of these things. And these are not people that identify as faith. And Dave Matthews actually says, hey, I'm an agnostic here. And I appreciated that because there was a real reality to the movie. And yes, there is a faith piece. But even, Hillary, or, Sharon, as she's known in the movie, there's no big moment where she says, oh, I have this moment where now I have this strong faith. She's just a really fabulous person who does this. Not from anything other than her brokenness and her, as you were saying, right? She catches the glimpse of a newspaper and says, oh, this poor man and these poor children, he lost his wife.
Sharon's pain from her upbringing definitely informs her choice.
That is correct.
To go help this family. Mm-hmm. But I like the fact that they went into the pain. I like the fact that they talked about how does her pain inform her decisions. I think that's one of the strengths of this movie is you really get to see emotionally where everyone's at.
I would agree with that. And even Ed, who, identified as a man of faith, but as his wife's passing and ultimately as she dies, he questions that. He doesn't know. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know if he has the faith. And having discussions with his daughter, though I understand what you're saying, that there's a certain type of a faith-based movie or kind of a Christian-based movie, this felt as if it had more depth than that. And obviously the faith piece is great, but I also think there has to be good acting, there has to be a good story and a reality of it. And it didn't feel overly sanitized or just, it's going to be happy the whole time. It's just not.
This movie isn't as intense as a movie reviewed last year, The Blind.
Sure.
But it's definitely up there.
Correct. So even though it has a little bit of the predictability, it has the faith element, I think it had a lot more realism. And at the end, it even had the epilogue of what's going on now and pictures, real pictures. I appreciate it. It felt like a complete movie. Do we have any questions from the box?
When telling a true story, there's still artistic choices that are taken. For instance, there's a point where a helicopter has to land, and the artistic choice is to do it at night with all these different challenges. But when they actually show the news footage, it was actually during the day, and there were other things going on. Do you think maybe going into the life of the mother a little bit more would have been a different artistic choice that could have given it a better tone to the movie.
I definitely agree, especially considering the mother is played by Amy Acker. I've seen a lot of Amy's work over the years, and I think she could have definitely carried it. I think it could have also added the emotional impact of, oh, these kids lost their mom. What does that look like? What does losing that relationship feel like? It feels much more powerful to an audience when you see something tangible. There's little glimpses here and there. Sharon actually does a makeover for the girls using the mother's makeup, and she doesn't even know it until the father brings it up. But I'd like to see some of that firsthand. It would add to the impact of maybe if you showed earlier in the movie, she did the same thing with the daughters. So then they're familiar with it and they don't think it's necessarily weird that Sharon's using their mom's makeup.
That's interesting. It's funny. I agree with you, but I disagree with you because I think the focus was Sharon. And I think that there's a certain part where if you're so invested in the mom, yes, you're feeling mom's past, but at the same time, are you going to be able to latch on to Sharon? Are you going to be going, Mom Sharon, Mom Sharon? Are you going to be playing that in your head? Or are you able to say, Mom's passed now, Sharon's coming in? And to be clear, she's not trying to be their mom. She's not trying to be, Alan's or Ed's girlfriend or anything like that. She's just trying to help this family.
I think it also could have been interesting too, because they talk about the mother being this woman of extraordinary faith, of extraordinary kindness. And Sharon's kind of having to relearn that for complete strangers, not just people in her immediate circle. Mm-hmm. So I think that could have been an interesting parallel. Like Sharon's having to live up to the legacy of the mom.
That's true. That's a good point. But I agree with the box that artistic choices, obviously we're not movie directors, we're not writers in that respect. That would be hard to know. To me, it felt cohesive, though, even though it's a little here, a little here. It felt as if it came together well.
I think so, too. From a historian perspective, part of me rolls my eyes and goes, oh, my gosh, they had to do it at night. They had to have the blanket floated around. From a filmgoer perspective, I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. That's a nice little wink and nod. But the two halves of me are very torn on this.
I agree with that. It's hard to know which way to go with it.
And that's why we're not movie directors yet.
Do we have any other questions from the box?
We've identified that there is a faith-based element to this movie. Do you think the audience needs to appreciate the faith-based to appreciate the movie, or will folks that don't have that in their life still appreciate this movie?
I think this movie is going to lose a lot of people with the faith-based audience, realistically. I think the people that are more faith ambivalent, say Dave Matthews, the agnostic, might appreciate this film because it talks about the role that faith plays in people's lives. If you're not interested in that, I don't think you're going to like this movie.
I'm going to disagree with you, respectfully, of course. I agree, and that's sort of the buzz that we were hearing, that if you don't have that faith piece, it's like, oh no. But I think historically, a lot of faith-based movies are heavy-handed, no room for people if they don't have that. And it's disappointing because you don't want to be untrue to the source, right? If Ed has faith, that's okay. That needs to be communicated. We're not going to water that down just to make it palatable for people that don't have that. But I think, because like we said with Sharon, it never really came to any part where it's like, oh, now she's doing this. We may have missed it, but I haven't seen anything to that effect. I think we're missing good, positive movies where people are good to one another, people are looking out for one another, people are kind, they take risks to build relationships. I think that's universal. And as we were talking about, Dave Matthews is producing it. Meg Tilly helped write it. I mean, these are people we don't traditionally say, oh, yeah, they're part of that faith-based circle. I don't think that there's a loss for that. And if it's not heavy-handed, I would hope that people that don't have that faith piece could respect the people that do, or would say, oh, if that's what that looks like, maybe that would be something I would explore.
I think this is a good middle ground movie.
I would agree. Honestly. Middle ground's a good way to say that. I also think one aspect that we didn't really talk much about, but is central to the entire movie, is the child aspect, right? We kind of said, oh, the child's suffering. We understand that. But I think if you're a parent, right? I'm a parent. The box is a parent. Other people on our team understand this as well. And I'm sure a lot of people in our cinema community are parents. If you've had that experience, this movie, I think, hits you on a whole different level Because if this is your child and your child may die, and you're trying to, and I think Alan Richter did a really good job of demonstrating this. He would do anything for his girls. He's working, 12, 16-hour days every single day, hard work. He's a roofer. And then trying to save his daughter in the small window. There is a certain part where it's not only in your head, you go, oh, he needs to get there. It's in your heart. You go, oh my gosh, if this was my child, what would I do? What would I not do? And I think many in our cinema community would be able to identify with that aspect of it. Rebecca, is that time of show? We have 5 angel moths floating around. What do you think? 1 to 5, 1 to 5?
2 moths today.
2 moths today. Number one reason.
This movie is predictable, and I've seen better from this cast. But it did take some elements that I think are missing in a lot of faith-based movies, and it translated them pretty decently to the screen.
Is there a movie or another movie that you would compare this to in terms of, it sounds like you're comparing it to other faith-based movies, but I would also say like other true stories.
I'm going to compare it to a faith-based movie that's also a true story, and that's also involved with our director. He actually wrote this movie, Jesus Revolution. I felt like I was more interested in the stories behind Jesus Revolution, not because of the organization that it came to birth, but also because these are painful stories that were brought to life in very vivid reality. Mm-hmm. And I felt like you really got to see the journey a bit more. You got more attached to the characters. It's just wham, bam, tragedy now.
Okay, and that's fair.
I know we got a lot of flack for our review on The Hill, but one of the things I really did like about The Hill was that they did take the time to understand the story. You got to see him growing up. You got to see how that changed. The Blind was another example that I mentioned earlier in this review. You got to see the progression of time and how things changed.
And it sounds like the progression would have helped this movie by a moth and a wing at a minimum.
Moth and a wing at a minimum. I think it would have helped you emotionally attach to the characters more, and it would have made more sense to see these characters change in their circumstances.
Sure. All right. 5 moths are coming to see me now. They're done seeing you. I would say this is a 3. It's above average in my mind. It did it well. Is there room for growth? Sure, right? Most movies are. But I did like the diversity of who brought this film together. That's always a great thing to me. The faith part, I was okay with because it felt accurate. The epilogue, how do you not love the epilogue? They had a great epilogue. And the casting was good. Even the young girl, Skywalker, who played, the girl who's really ill, that's a hard one to knock out of the park. And I think she did a great job at it.
But that's also really tough when we're talking about this movie for so long.
Yes.
We saw this movie, a few days ago?
Sure.
And we can barely remember some of the characters' names. That kind of tells you how well they're sticking in your head.
That's a fair piece. And that's why it's not high above average, but it is above average in some of the areas. Thanks for joining us this week. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for a review of the new movie, Dune, Part 2. Then come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary with snark meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this movie review, you might click the link to check out our review of Bob Marley, One Love, or click the other link to watch last week's show where we reviewed Madame Web.
Remember, cinema community movies are better together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.